Okay, wow. There is a lot of information right now going around about Project Scarlett, which includes, at this time, it seems pretty locked in. Microsoft is going to show up next generation with two systems at launch, it seems. They'll have a cheaper one and a more expensive one, and some, we'll say, leaks, although after checking around and kind of where this stuff came from, I think Windows Central has some pretty good information here. Okay, what I'll say is this: fairly recently, dev kits started going out more and more for Project Scarlett, and all of a sudden, some marketing material, we'll say, is making its way out there. All right, it sounds suspiciously like information that would show up with a dev kit. We'll say that. All right, so let's just put it out there. This seems like this information is good, very good, and there's a lot to go over here. This was done by Windows Central. If you want to follow along, or if you want to look into it a little further yourself, I'll leave a link down below. It's good information in there because it's starting to give us a look at next generation, specifically some things that are going to be tackled, I guess, next generation. And I like what I'm hearing because it sounds like they're pushing for convenience, which is great because there are some things that I've been frustrated with this generation, as I'm sure a lot of you have been, which we'll talk about. And I think it is a great direction for game streaming. Yeah, game streaming. It's going to be kind of used more like a solution to an issue that we've been running into with current systems. And then we also have specs in terms of how powerful these things could be. It's some exciting stuff right now. It's feeling like that road to next generation. And I really like this because it's fun when we start to talk about systems that are going to be showing up, and it's a good time. So let's go into this article, some of the information, and we'll kind of talk a bit about it. Make sure if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you're hitting the like button to help out with YouTube's weird algorithm that no one actually understands. Let's go over here. So this is Windows Central inside the target specs of the next Xbox: Project Scarlett, Anaconda, and Lockhart. So we have two systems. One is going to be cheaper, that's Lockhart. The other one's going to be more expensive. And I'm going to go over the information here in the specs. And I want you to, as you hear this, start thinking about how much we think Anaconda is going to be. I think Lockhart is going to be $400 as its roof, possibly $300 as its floor. That's kind of where I'm thinking, just based on what I'm hearing and the specs and everything here. I don't know if they can get it below $300. That would be obscene if they could. That'd be great because that just means it'll be easier for people to get into next generation who maybe don't care about 4K. But think about specifically Anaconda and how much that'll be, okay? Because this is going to be a question at the end here, and I'm going to talk a bit about why it could be more than we were thinking originally. Okay, so let's go down here. It says Microsoft's gearing up to reveal a two-pronged attack for next-gen consoles, complete with a more affordable SKU, dubbed Lockhart, with a more beastly premium SKU codenamed Anaconda. It sounds like we had heard about this before, and it kind of went away, and now it's back, seemingly because they are briefing developers on their strategy going into next generation. And I think one of their something they were trying to do was possibly catch Sony off guard a bit with having a cheaper system. We believe Sony's showing up with one SKU, right? And it could be about $500. But if Microsoft shows up with a $300 SKU that is an entry point into next generation, that would have Sony kind of on their heels a bit and say, wait a minute, they're going to show up at retail with a system that's $200 possibly cheaper than ours. Even if it's $100 cheaper, we saw it with the PlayStation 4 right away. That was enough to give them a big advantage at retail, right? I mean, right away, they were off and running. And of course, the PS4 was also more powerful. So some things to think about there. They, of course, say 2020. We all know that at this point. We assume it's going to launch around the same time as the PS5. That's already been confirmed. This is where things get pretty interesting. We start talking about how powerful this thing could be. So according to several sources familiar with Microsoft's plans, Anaconda is targeting around 12 teraflops of computing power compared to Xbox One's 6 teraflops and the Xbox One S's 1.4. That's a pretty large jump from the base Xbox. So we're going generation to generation here. I know we have mid consoles and the refreshes and everything, but if you consider 2013, when the Xbox One released at, they say, about 1.4 teraflops, that is a large jump to 12. That is big. That is not a little jump. Now, it's not quite 10 times or anything, but it's still quite a bit more powerful. And then we also have to remember they're also jumping up in generations for AMD's architecture, right? It's going to be Navi based, and they'll have Zen CPUs, and it's going to be much more capable than what we're used to now with the Xbox. The Xbox One, the old VCR, that thing has a hard time as it is. It does. It really does. If you play one of those now, whew, it's not good. It struggles. Games like Anthem or Jedi Fallen Order are like in the 20s for frames per second, sometimes in the teens. It is not a pleasant experience. Most people now will tell you, look for an Xbox One X on sale. So this is going to be a large jump. Now, the Xbox One X is a bit more interesting because we're comparing that at 6 teraflops, which on its face sounds like, just doubling up in terms of raw compute power, but there is a lot more to think about here. You have memory bandwidth. You, of course, have the extra little features that I'm sure Microsoft will bake into this, whether it's better DirectX 12 handling, because that was something that the Xbox One X had. It was pretty much crushing Forza when they first showed it off with 70% GPU utilization, and it was rolling at 4K 60. So they could bake that in. It sounds like ray tracing will be a focus that could be baked in, as well as we kind of heard Sony talk about it being hardware-based. Sounds like AMD is going to be showing off their solution for ray tracing earlier next year in 2020, and we'll find out more, I guess, about what the next Xbox and the next PlayStation will have inside of their systems, as they're going to follow AMD's roadmap pretty much here. And they could also do some other things on top of that. And then the biggest jump is, I think, going to be that SSD. It's not going to be something that people will talk about as much as raw compute power like teraflops, but I think it is going to be a massive game changer inside of your Xbox One X or your PlayStation 4 Pro, unless you've changed out for whatever reason, because it doesn't take advantage as much since everything's being developed for 5400 RPM drives, and those things are slow. They are slow. It's a pain at times for different things to take place, and we don't even know about it because it's the developers who have to deal with it. So that will be very interesting to see how all of that comes together. Now, Lockhart is going to be an interesting system because it's technically on its face going to be less powerful than the X at 4 teraflops. Now, you see that and you say, well, wait a minute, why would anyone get that? Well, if you also consider the fact that it's going to be jumping ahead to Navi, right? So that will be more capable there, and then better CPUs. You'll also have, of course, the SSD. I think that 4 teraflops will actually end up fairly comparable to even better than what the Xbox One X does currently. Like there's a lot more than just raw compute power, and of course you're comparing AMD's new architecture to their older stuff. Everything I think lines up for, while Lockhart's showing a lower we'll say brute force power, computational power, I think it's still going to be more capable, which is the most important part, because once you start seeing it in action, you'll forget about the lower teraflop count. There's a lot more going on here than just that, especially when you consider they could have straight up ray tracing like built in at a hardware level. Once you have that on, all of a sudden the games will just look better straight up because of that, especially when developers get their hands on it and know that every system they're creating for will have access to ray tracing. So you will see some pretty cool stuff, I think, things we haven't seen yet because it's still in its infancy with just certain video cards really using it. And a lot of people haven't even upgraded from their 1080 Ti because NVIDIA just made a card that was just too good at the time and still really good. A lot of people haven't even upgraded to RTX cards yet. I just got an RTX 2070 Super, and now I'm hearing about this Xbox Scarlett Anaconda being 12 teraflops. That is stronger than the 5700 XT, and by a good bit actually at this point. So that also being a closed box could put it on, I think, even possibly comparable to a 2080 Ti. Consider that for a second. Just because it's closed box, of course, means developers will know what they're creating for. Yes, it is going to be fascinating to see some of these games in action. Now, they also seemingly got frequencies of the CPU cores at 3.5 gigahertz, 8 cores. We already knew that. I'll be curious if it is 16 threads, but 8 cores, of course, 3.5 gigahertz. That thing is going to roll over Jaguar cores that are currently used in the systems. Now, that is one of the biggest weak points of these systems. Of course, we know game consoles, right now anyway, tend to be GPU heavy. They're lopsided towards the GPU, especially on the Xbox One X. It's ridiculous. I mean, they are strapping these ridiculous video cards essentially to these tiny little laptop processors. It is insane. But to have something of the Zen right? CPUs that are going to be a bit more even with something on the GPU side. It'll be interesting to see how they utilize that with open worlds, AI, and then anything else they want to use that power for. And they go a bit further and they tell us that there will be 16 gigabytes total of system memory. And to think about that, I assume, as most of us do, it'll be GDDR6, should have a higher memory bandwidth than what we see with something like the Xbox One X, probably by a good margin. And what this all boils down to for me is that the Xbox Anaconda, if we want to call it that, that's a code name. They'll tell us. I hope they don't go with they might, like a Pro moniker or something. I don't know. We'll see. But like the Xbox, I don't know, the Xbox Scarlett Pro or Xbox Pro. If they call it the Xbox Pro, that's going to be ridiculous. But it sounds like all of this is coming together to be a 4K 60 machine. Now it comes down to, of course, the developers actually utilizing that and saying, well, we're okay with 4K 30 because it's more cinematic and we'll take advantage of all the extra bells and whistles to make the game look that much prettier. I'm okay with you toning it back a little bit to give me that smooth 60 frames per second, but that is me. I'm sure some people out there are okay with 30. Okay, I really like this part because it is utilizing xCloud in a way that I think is very clever. I think it is a great idea. I still wonder, what is Stadia for, right? Like for like a lot of people, Stadia doesn't make as much sense because you are constantly reliant on it, right? Your internet connection, all of that has to be up to par for it to work consistently. But take a look at this, because I really like this idea. This is what it's coming down to. For the biggest problem I have this generation is waiting to play your game. You buy the game, whether it's on, let's say you buy it digitally, you got to download it, and then you got to patch it, and then you got to look for more updates, and then finally, like 3 hours later, you're playing the game you bought. But then if you go to the store and you buy it, you bring it home, you put the disc in, and then you wait, and then you wait, and then you update, and then you wait, and then you install, and then you wait. Okay, now I can play hours later at times. I bought Red Dead Redemption 2, and that thing took forever to even be able to play. Well, this, I think, is a great utilization of xCloud. It says games with load times anywhere up to 1 minute, of course, will be reduced to mere seconds. That's from the SSDs. And the inclusion of Project xCloud across all Xbox systems will allow you to start gaming via streaming while waiting for games to download locally. Next Gen is all about saving you time, increasing read speeds by gigabytes per second, while also providing cutting-edge visuals that will elevate games to all new heights. I really like the idea of using xCloud as a solution to a problem of long install times, long downloads. This is a clever idea. Now, my question, of course, is can they manage all of that happening all at once on the system and not give you a junk experience when you are streaming the game? Now, I would assume you'd be streaming the game for half an hour before maybe it hands it off, and all of a sudden your resolution jumps from 1080p because it's we'll say it's like limited to 1080p, right? Because you're downloading as well in the background. They want to make sure it's all smooth and you get the game quickly. All of a sudden, while you're playing, it has the ability to hand off to the system locally, and it jumps to 4K, right? And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess the download's done. That would be clever. That's phenomenal if they can do that. It comes down to if they can do it. But I think that is a massive advantage they can have over everything. I mean, seriously, consider that. We're talking the game updating, right? We're talking about the game downloading. So even if you're playing on the Switch, which is designed to be as fast as possible to get you from starting the game to playing it, it would be faster than that because we assume you'd hit the button and say, hey, would you like to stream the game while you're waiting for it to download? We'll just use xCloud and beam the game to you. Yeah? Okay, well, you're playing now. Sure, there'll be some latency and everything, but after it's done downloading and installing, it'll just hand off and all of a sudden it's local. I like that idea a lot because it's a way to solve a problem we're running into now. And of course, at least, downloads are always going to take time. Installing through the Blu-ray drive is always going to take time. But if you can mix that with something like xCloud, that is a great idea. And of course, they say that it'll be fully backwards compatible. Scarlett will be able to run all previous gen games that are available on Xbox One today, and that includes all of the backwards compatible games Microsoft has already announced. So I assume that means back to the original Xbox, the Xbox 360, and then the entire library of the Xbox One. That will be huge day one, of course, because it really doesn't have us hesitate as much to make the jump because all of our games will just carry over. Good. That's that's what we all want. We want it for the PlayStation 5 as well, but Microsoft has been building this backwards compatible library that I am very happy could be carried over. And that, of course, means that we assume games would run even better and look even better, right? Next generation, because they, of course, will scale. We have games on the Xbox One X that are supposed to be 4K, but they're not necessarily. They're just checkerboarded up and all of that. I would assume that means that games on Scarlett, whether it's, I guess, because even on the, I would say even on Lockhart, you'll probably see games that look probably even a bit better, especially if they go back and maybe do some patching and ray tracing gets added in. That would be crazy. But I really like the idea of you buying it and boom, it's just there. And of course, games that, let's say, don't have smooth frame rates, maybe all of a sudden, because they have so much power, are just completely smooth. 60 frames maybe the whole time for some of these current Xbox One games will be great. Really, I think right now I like that I'm hearing more about other things outside of just raw power. Sure, we hear about the teraflops and all this other stuff, but I like the idea of hearing about load times being eliminated, or at least delivery times being eliminated, because it's been a pain this generation to pop a game in and realize I'm not going to be playing it for a while, or you could download it at night and then you go to bed because you realize, well, I was up for the midnight release, but there's no way I'm going to get a chance to play any of this beforehand, because back in the day, we used to just pop a game in and it would work, right? And now we're to the point where we know we're installing a game. I like that they're working on solutions for that. And of course, I like the idea of full backwards compatibility. And my one last question is, how much is Anaconda going to be? Because what they've described here sounds like more than $500. If they really hit 12 teraflops, that is starting to sound more and more like a $600 machine. But I do also wonder if Microsoft is willing to take a hit on the systems, right? Lose some money on each one sold to get them into our houses, and then eventually, right, make money on us through software like xCloud and Game Pass, which is their big driving force right now. And of course, get more and more out there with something like Lockhart that they could also eat the cost on, right? They could make Lockhart $300 and really make Sony step back and say, wow, they're going to launch a next-gen system at $300 and we're about to launch our PS5 at $500. Because if they get the Anaconda out at $500 and it's more powerful, and they announce games like Fable and Halo Infinite ready to go at launch, they might have a much better chance this generation than they did last time with the Xbox One getting straight up steamrolled by the PlayStation 4. But let me know what you guys think about this. There's a lot of information here. Like I said, a link's down below if you want to read through it again and check it out. I'm excited for next generation. I'm ready. I think we're going to hear more about both of these systems in the next few months. I think February to March is where we'll really start to hear about information. And then, of course, going into E3, where we should see some games. I'm very excited to see what games look like on these systems, how they function, how they load, and what these developers have been able to do with all this extra power, and I'll say much more capable system. That's the biggest thing. You're going to hear about teraflops, and they're not going to line up. They're not going to match up because there will be more things around all of that. So, exciting stuff, guys. Let me know what you think about this down below. How much is Anaconda going to cost? How much is Lockhart going to cost? And I'll see you guys next time.